Hey everyone, I'm Adele Shaw and I'm the head trainer and founder of the Willing Equine. And here today we are with Tessa, who is from Texas, and she's here visiting, doing a short internship. And I'm going to let her introduce herself.
Hi guys, I have 3 horses of my own. My sister has 4 horses of her own as well, and we have 2 donkeys and dogs and cats and chickens, and we have so many animals. But yeah, I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about your horses and your other animals.
So Ryan was my first horse, and he is like a thoroughbred paint cross, and he's 21. And he's retired from what we used to do and everything. And then Zen is a rescue. He's a little like Welsh pony, and
he's super cute. He has like so much mane.
Oh yeah, for sure. You can't even see his eyes, his ears.
He's flax. What would you call his color? He's
probably
like a chestnut.
Yeah, chestnut sorrel probably.
But he has a really light mane. Wouldn't that be of like a flax and chestnut?
Yeah. And they think he's about like 7 or 8, but they don't know for sure because he was found like a stray.
Okay.
And so I got him from a rescue down here in Texas. And then Arrow is the newest addition to the herd, and he is an off-the-track thoroughbred, and he's 5 years old, and he recently got injured, so but potentially I want to train him maybe to jump and just have fun with him, and he's kind of like the newest project. So,
and a total drama queen and a lot of
fun.
Oh,
for sure. Yeah.
The flies. He's always like super sensitive.
Super sensitive. Makes everything so much bigger than it is. But then he also, like, if he gets hurt or something, he's just like, eh. But then he just, like, responds to the littlest things, so.
Well, and he's also raising hell with the other guys in the pasture, too. He's crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy fun. And tell me about your other animals.
So the 2 donkeys that we have actually came with the house that we bought. A long time ago, so they are quite older, but they just hang out in the pasture, and they're little feral wild little donkeys. And then my sister's horses, one of her horses is actually the first horses that we got.
Okay.
And so she's been with us for many, many years. And then her other horse, Apollo, she does dressage with him, and then she has a Mustang. And then her recent horse is a Hanoverian, and so she just bought her for a dressage project. And so, yeah, those are all of our horses.
The horses, and then you have dogs and cats. And
yes, inside cats, outside cats, dogs, chickens.
It's like if you're an animal person, you're an animal person.
Oh, you go all the way. Zoo everywhere.
Zoo.
Every corner that we make, there's an animal. Someone's getting hurt. Someone's fine. Someone's in the hospital. Someone's just it's everywhere.
Yeah, I feel that. So you mentioned you live here in Texas, which is where we're located as well. And you're here for doing a short internship, which you've done many times. As you're a student of mine, and you've been a student for a while, and so I'm really excited to have you here. And we thought we would sit down and really talk to you guys about, to start a series where I get together with students or other people that I know, and I ask them about their horsemanship journey and their journey so far with learning about positive reinforcement and just how it's impacted their life and the way they work with their horses. And so I'm really excited to have you as my first guest and to talk about that. Here. Yeah. So how long have you been in equestrian, and how did you get started?
I've been in equestrian for 7 years now, I think.
Okay.
I started, my sister and I, we just wanted to find something that we could really get into that was outside and could help us with our brains and just like really, connecting through nature and everything. And so we lived like 7 minutes from a facility at the time, and my dad was always like, you guys should go down and get into horses, because my dad grew up around horses. And
little did he know what he was signing up for.
Oh yeah, they had no idea. So like for years he was like, you guys should go check it out, and we finally did, and immediately fell in love. Before we went to the barn though, we had our oldest mare that we have now, and then we got donkeys with her. So they were like the first set of farm animals that we had.
Yeah.
And so then we we had her for like a couple years, and then we finally got into the barn and really riding a lot. And so it was an English barn, eventing, and dressage. I got into eventing. I immediately fell in love with jumping and doing all like the high adrenaline stuff. And my sister was more on like the dressage side.
Her and I matched up. I'm more in the dressage.
Yeah. And so I rode a lot of lesson horses, and my sister had another horse that she wanted to bring in for training. So they went into training, and then I was riding lesson horses, getting like learning about jumping and equitation and all that kind of stuff. And then I eventually found Ryan, immediately fell in love with him, and so I bought him. And
he's your older horse,
yes,
your gelding.
Yes, he's 21 now. And so we've been through a lot together. He led me to positive reinforcement, and we've been through so much together. But so we competed for a few years, and then we had to kind of slow things down. He started having some problems, and later did we find out that it was pain related, and so he had a lot of back pain, eventually kissing spine, and then he tore a check ligament, and then he had some like ligaments and stuff going on in his lower limbs and like feet and everything. Yeah. So at that point, he had to be retired, and then so I made that decision he could have been brought back, but I decided that it was time to retire him. Yeah. So then during that time, I realized that as much as I enjoyed eventing and as much as I loved riding, I always felt that there was something missing. I always felt there was a missing piece in that. But I didn't realize it until I found positive reinforcement, because I never knew that there was something else out there. Yeah. And so once I started diving into positive reinforcement and realizing that there was a whole nother world and area that I could connect and train my horses with and everything, my whole life completely changed. And I started realizing that as much as I loved eventing, it just wasn't my thing. And I loved the eventing part, but the way I was training my horses, it just didn't feel right. And so at that time, when Ryan was on stall rest and we had decided to retire him and we were just taking it easy, I just decided to give it a try and immediately fell in love with it. And it was very hard in the beginning, because I had to give up riding at the time, and he was my only horse, so I couldn't go
to give up something you really loved, but at the time it was for the purpose of having a greater goal.
Right. Yeah. And so I went through a lot of ups and downs in the beginning, and it was really hard balancing out like just everything and like where to like put a midpoint in the training and everything and the balances, and but as soon as and then I found you in the beginning, and be guided by you and amazing and all of that. And so the journey has just been amazing, and I would never go back and change anything if I had the chance. I would always choose to, as much how hard it was in the beginning, if I didn't go through that, I wouldn't be where I am today. Yeah. And kind of just realizing the importance of certain things. And
would you say that what you were kind of after was a relationship with Ryan, more so than just being out there goal achieving? Yes. And so you had to set aside some of those competitive goals and those riding goals for the relationship aspect, that you really wanted a different type of interaction and communication and relationship with him than you had before. Not to say that what before was bad, it just didn't feel quite right. Like there was something, like you said, missing. Do you feel like positive reinforcement and just the focus on that has really helped fill that gap for you guys?
For sure, because as much as we do have like behavior goals and things that we want to accomplish, the main focus has always, like since switching, has been the relationship and building a connection with one another, allowing him and knowing that my horses have a choice to participate, and that my overall goals do not override their well-being and their welfare.
Yeah, that we're not placing our agenda over their needs and their choice and all of that, and kind of so prioritizing what we need and want. What are some of the areas in your horsemanship that you feel like positive reinforcement has made the biggest impact on? Like if you were to narrow down very specific interactions with Ryan or any of your other horses, because I know your other horses, Arrow and Zen, came after you started learning more about positive reinforcement. Specifically with Ryan, when that transition started and even after, if you look back now, you're like, this area is so much different and so much better even, or maybe worse, but what areas have made the biggest change since making that change?
For sure, the my intentions of like training and the goals that I have in the relationship aspect, like we talked about. The biggest thing for me, I think, was realizing that things happen and everything can't be perfect, and just because we are training with positive reinforcement doesn't mean that we're always going to be able to use it and always everything be perfect. And I think positive reinforcement has really taught me patience in the journey and the learning process for both me and my horses. I think that the goal, so like the mindset of goals that I have, so like when I would event and I would ride, as much as I loved Ryan and everything, my focus was on, like how you said, how I can like progress further in the goals that I have as a rider, and I want to eventually become like, you know, the top rider or whatever.
Yeah, and he kind of served those goals, right? Or he provided the pathway to those goals, but it wasn't necessarily about him so much as it was about achieving your goals.
Yeah, it was more focused on me. So in this whole journey, the biggest change has been the focus on the horse and the focus on Ryan and what I can do to help him and pursue the journey with him at the top, you know. And so that's been a huge change for me.
Yeah, I can definitely see how that would be. Do you think, maybe you were mentioning before about how everything's not perfect and all that, do you think maybe that could be summed up in like understanding that we can't necessarily control the outcome for everything?
For sure, yeah.
I think for me that was a huge change because I'm very type A, very controlling, and I remember one of the biggest steps for me in the transition, because in the beginning, I still maintained a lot of that control. I still wanted to manipulate the outcomes. I still wanted to force the outcome that I wanted. Even if I was now clicking and giving food, I was still manipulating the outcome, and I was still very focused on my goal or the highway. And so it was that next level beyond just the click and the treat, and beyond the effectiveness. One of my favorite quotes being, effectiveness is not enough. And I think it's Dr. Susan Friedman who says that. Maybe it's said by many people, but so effectiveness is not enough. That took time to sink in. It took time to sink in, and for me to actually embrace giving control and choice to the horse. Sure. And then when that happened, that was like, so there's positive reinforcement, and then there's that next tier of like handing back, I guess I should say, handing back some of the choice or much of the choice and control back to the learner. That was a whole nother learning curve that happened and took a long time for me to be okay with. Emotionally, mentally, spiritually, just like, I don't have to achieve this one goal today. Like, I can set it aside, we can move on, you know, whatever. Or making decisions that, like, you were even already experiencing in your traditional training. Like, you decided, even though you could bring Ryan back into to eventing, that it was in his best interest to, well, at the time, it seemed like it was in his best interest to just let him retire, right? That's a hard thing to do. That's a hard thing to do, to make those decisions, knowing that it could mean the end to a goal for yourself. And for me personally, that process didn't occur till well into my positive reinforcement journey, because I was still so set on goals and achieving the goals, and positive reinforcement just seemed to be more effective. And so it was still getting me to that end goal, the end finish line, right? And then being able to step aside and say, you know, look at it from an outside perspective, removing my own agenda and my own selfishness from the picture, and saying, for this horse, this goal is not in their best interest. and being okay with that. And then not only that, not passing them off because they no longer fit my agenda.
Right.
And that is so, that is just, is really challenging. Whether you're doing positive reinforcement or not, that's a challenging thing to overcome in prioritizing the horse's well-being over our goals.
Yeah, so. It was very challenging. And especially from my outside influences, my trainers were constantly like, you know, maybe you should start looking for another horse. Maybe you should sell Ryan and, you know, move on. And it was really hard because, like, he was the first horse I was like, when I get very attached to my animals, like, I'm not selling him. Like, sorry guys, I don't care what you say.
You had a relationship with him. And he had served you well, and like he was doing his best, and it wasn't his fault that he got injured.
Exactly. And so that was kind of like the first, like you said, like the first set of like moving towards something new, because I was already kind of going out of the norm, and so it made it a little easier for me because like I left my barn after that, and so it made it a little easier for me to kind of move on to something new and start finding something new. And like you said in the beginning, it was hard for me to let go of that control, because like you said, as much as you're using positive reinforcement, you still can control the outcome, and you still can control, you know, what you want to achieve and everything. And then I realized that it's an endless journey, and we're never going to get to the end. We're never going to get to a finish line.
Yeah, there's no finish line.
There's no finish line. It's ongoing learning process. And
and as soon as like so you have these goals set in your mind, right? And you're like, okay, I want to get to riding my horse. That's your goal. And then as soon as you achieve that, next goal shows up. So it's like the goals never end. And at some point you have to admit to yourself that some goals, I mean, it's just, I don't know. It's just like, feel like we're in this endless race with our horses. It's constantly to the next goal, next goal, next goal. And we never stop to think about like what it's doing to us, what it's doing to our horses, and what it's doing to our relationship. Right. And coming from somebody like me, like I'm in my 30s, and this is, you took a step that took me a long time because, like I said, I sought out positive reinforcement as a tool that was still going to help me reach my goal. And you had already set aside a major goal. You had started that process before even switching to positive reinforcement. So this is why I love talking to people, because there's different paths we take
for sure
to achieving, I guess we could say it's another goal. It's just a different goal, which is prioritizing the relationship. And, I guess it would be useful to operationalize that, to operationalize what we're talking about when we say a relationship, because I think in everybody's mind, we can all be saying relationship, but like, what are we talking about? Well, and obviously, and clearly also relationship, we could be a negative relationship, an unpleasant one, an aversive relationship, or an competitive one, and a nice one that we find enjoyable. So I can go first or you can go first, but I'd love to hear what I guess you could explain specifically and operationalize it for you. What was the type of relationship you were looking for with Ryan that led you to positive reinforcement?
I think it was wanting to have a relationship where we could work together instead of butting heads. So working against each other constantly, you know, like I would ask him to do something. Oh, if he doesn't want to do it, okay, you have to do it. Like it's more of a two-way communication. Yeah. And so, and one that we can just like, just trust one another, and seeing the relationship that I was seeking was seeing him. The joy that I found was seeing him being able to participate on his own, and so. Him realizing that he could say no. That was the biggest thing, I think, was I wanted to strive for something that I could find joy in just as much, because in order for me to find joy, I need to see that he is willing, and he's, you know, like he's enjoying the training process. And so I feel like the relationship aspect of it is two-way communication, and that we're working together in
two-way choice. Almost. Like it's not just one person getting enjoyment from the relationship, but it's also two beings, not just one being getting enjoyment from the relationship, but the other one choosing to participate and finding joy in it. And we could operationalize joy and we could go down that path, but I'm not going to. I think I don't think for me, well, initially that wasn't what I was after. I was after effectiveness. And then it dawned on me how much more enjoyable it was to see my horses choose to participate with me. But man, it's challenging when they tell you no. And you have to shed that like ego and that pride, and you have to let go of it, and it's okay for your horse to tell you no. I think we're all taught from the very early days, like they don't have a choice, that they don't know what's best for them. You be the leader, you tell them and it's like they're this mindless participant that doesn't know what's good for them and that they have to participate. And if they don't, then it's them needing you to be a stronger leader, needing you to show them what's in their best interest,
and to give them a job.
Give them a job because that's what they were born to do. So we're fulfilling their innate whatever
expectations.
And if we're not doing that, then we're doing a disservice to them. So we're taught from a very early age that we're doing a disservice to them by not forcing them to participate. And then it feels very wrong, and we get guilt tripped when we choose to let them choose.
For sure.
And so that can be really challenging to overcome and to embrace that that there's a way to go about things where they actually may enjoy the training process. And from my experience, and I know from your experience as well, they do start off by saying no. They say no because all of a sudden they have this opportunity to say no. So they're like, oh yes, I'm going to say no all the time. Like no to this, no to that, no to everything. But if you show them that there's value in saying yes, and you make it a positive experience, and you show them that their ability to say no won't be removed, that's the biggest thing, is we have to refrain from saying, as much as possible, obviously emergency situations are different, but if we can refrain from arbitrarily just taking that away, just like today, you just have to do this just because I said so. If we refrain from doing that, then all of a sudden those yeses start coming. And first they're hesitant, and then it's like, hell yes. Like it's over.
Over and over on board.
And now you're like, leave me alone.
Have some me time.
Let's just chill. So it does a total switch over. Which is a really addicting feeling, actually.
For sure.
And now I don't know how I could never
Me either.
experience anything else with horses now. But yeah, so there's just so much to unpack there as far as our conditioning as equestrians, how we treat our horses, the stigmas and the like I said, conditioning that goes into just how we're supposed to treat horses. And I think a lot of us are born, if you watch children from an early age, they kind of already know how to use positive reinforcement. They already know how not to force things to do what we want. And they're not perfect at it. I mean, there's times I've had my kids be like, why can't we just make him stay here? And I have to explain to him, the child, this is why we choose. And they get it. They get it right away. Whereas an adult, after many, many years, it takes a long time to say, it's not just one conversation.
Right.
It's over and over and over again, and influences and support and being willing to listen to the fact that you're having an internal struggle about it, and put steps in place to protect your horse from that, because that's shown up many times for me where I have this goal over here of giving my horse a choice, but then I just will have a bad day.
For sure.
And I'm like, no, I just freaking want them to do it, right?
Yeah.
And I have to be willing and able and know what to do in those situations, that I can just like, nope, cut it off. I need to take a break. I need to go recenter and come back to this. Whereas kids don't seem, because they don't have that learning history, they don't seem to go through that same struggle. So anyway, I just find that super interesting.
For sure. It hasn't been ingrained in them for so many years.
Exactly.
And yeah, they haven't been learning one way and then completely switch. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that's really hard for people, especially that have been doing it for so long, because we've been taught so many years to do this to our horse and to think this way and to, you know, perceive situations in this manner, and then we completely switch. And it's learning to find the ways to cope with everything, and like that will help us and will help us, you know, pursue with the horses and everything. And then I think it's really hard for people to start learning about positive reinforcement and looking back on the old journey and the old way that they used to treat their horses and train them, and not beat themselves up about it, because I know I did this for a long time, and I had a bunch of guilt and regret when I started learning about positive reinforcement, because Ryan had, when I started training with positive reinforcement, I started seeing all of the trauma that he had with being ridden, and then I looked back on like when I was riding when he was injured, but I didn't know at the time, and so it's just a lot to process, like when you're switching. And I just think it's really important for people to remember that you didn't know back then, and you know, like
you didn't know, and it was part of the process of getting you here.
Exactly.
So,
because if I didn't go through that, I wouldn't be here. Yeah. And so everything happens for a reason, and so we just have to remember that we're here because of that. And so,
I totally agree. So, what do you think would be your advice to somebody who's interested in exploring positive reinforcement more, but haven't taken those to first steps, or maybe they have taken their first steps, but they're still exploring. They're still not sure where it fits in, or how much they want to use it, or if they, you know, I don't know. Just what would your advice be to them based on your own experiences and what you would have found helpful early on?
I think, well, first of all, definitely find a mentor, an instructor, somebody that can guide you, and can be there for you when you're struggling, and just allows you to prepare you for success, and just guide you through the journey, and find a community that will be there to support you, and through all the ups and downs and everything, and then be easy on yourself. Don't be like hard on yourself, and don't beat yourself up about so many different things. And patience is one of like the number one things, because it's a long process, and we can't see results right away. And we can't expect ourselves to completely transition overnight, and it's a long learning process where we have to you know, take in education slowly at a time, and new learning, and new like the new sciences and everything, and just finding the balance of researching and then training, because I feel like a lot of times we can fall into the trap of wanting to learn, and like hammer it so hard, but we're not applying it. And so
or
I think,
vice versa, where people will go straight out and train and don't do enough research.
And so I feel like finding that balance in researching and educating yourself, and then applying it with your horses and with your animals, I feel like that is a big thing, so that you don't run into, you can eliminate certain problems in that sense, and just setting up better for success in that.
Yeah, I think one thing I'd add to that is the patience aspect. Having patience with your horse too.
Oh, for sure.
Because a lot of them are coming in with a lot of baggage. And like we mentioned before, they're going to start saying no a lot. They're going to start showing you. I talk about, this is kind of like the unpacking that starts to happen when they start showing you, like you mentioned, everything that's been there that we just haven't seen. It takes time. You know, we tend to think about, okay, we've been an equestrian, let's say for 20 years or 10 years or 5 years even. It doesn't matter how long you've been an equestrian. And then we want to learn about positive reinforcement, and we want to know and do and perform at the same level that we were doing with our traditional training, now with positive reinforcement in like 3 months. And that's just not realistic. Of course, the information you learned previously will serve you, and you can utilize it going forward. Picking out a hoof is the same as far as like how you actually clean it out is the same. So that part you don't have to relearn, but the actual training process has to be relearned, and you need to offer yourself the same amount of time and grace to be a beginner again that you did when you were an early beginner, like when you first started taking riding lessons, when you were first that kid that couldn't figure out which side of the girth to put on which side of the horse, and you're like, wait a minute, there's a stretchy part and there's a not stretchy part, or wait, this girth now has two stretchy parts, like what do I do with this? And your mind just goes blank, and you're like, how do I get the cross ties on? And your trainer walks in, you've put the cross ties on the wrong part of the halter, or the halter's on upside down, or whatever happens. And as kids, I think we're a lot more lenient on ourselves, and some people come into this as adults, and it's always harder to be a learner again as an adult, but we know we're beginners. We know we're beginners. We expect to learn. We expect to be taught. We expect to be make mistakes. And then we start learning about positive reinforcement, and we're like, what do you mean it's going to take me X amount of time? What do you mean I have to go through a course? What do you mean I need a trainer? What do you mean I need a mentor or a community or whatever? Can't I just get the clicker in the treat pouch and start clicking? And the answer is no, you can't just do that. I mean, you can try. That's how I started. And I made a lot of mistakes, and I created a lot of problems. And some people, that's the process they need to take, and that's fine. That's the process I needed to take. Also, when I started, there was a lot less resources than there are now. Yeah, it's okay. Whatever journey you need to take, it's a journey you need to take. But I think your recommendations are very useful to help people work past quickly some of those rough patches or avoid them completely. So I definitely agree.
Yeah, definitely giving, like you said, your horse time, because there will be moments, like in the beginning when they're unpacking and everything, you might have a tendency to just want to give up, and because they'll just keep saying no and no and no, or they'll go in the beginning and they'll just, you think that they've got it going on and everything's great because they're saying yes, 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 because they had in their past experience, they know they don't have a choice, and so they'll have a moment where you'll probably be doing really, really good, and then you'll hit a slope.
And
where they'll realize that they have a choice and that they can say no, and then finding the mindset to want to keep going on, and then you eventually go into the next stage where it's like amazing and it's just so fun, and they're constantly saying yes, and
that's something I think takes people by surprise. Is you can start off with a horse that appears very willing and is engaged, and then a couple weeks, 2 months in, depending on how much training you were doing and how much choice they had, and how many opportunities they had to say no, and all the different factors. A couple weeks to months in, I've had this happen like 3 months in. The horse will go hands up. Oh, you mean I have a choice to do this? You won't make me do any training? Then my answer is no to everything. And you're like, wait, what just happened? They were doing great, and now everything's just gone. And it always comes back, but how long it takes, I can't tell you. It depends on the horse, depends on the trauma, depends on how often you're training, it depends on the environment, depends on so many factors. But that definitely can be a bit of a blow to your confidence.
Oh, for sure.
Because you then think, I did something wrong. When in reality, you actually did the exact right thing. You just need to give your horse time and space. And space, not to completely stop training, but space to be able to say no. And all of that. So
and just learning the way of this new training process. And because like you said, we can be equestrians for many, many years, and just because we have learned in that area doesn't mean that we're an expert in this area. And we can't, when we go into positive reinforcement training, we cannot expect to make the same progress as we did in our past experiences, and we can't compare like the progression rates and everything that we are doing now to our past experiences,
or even to what other people around you, whether it's positive reinforcement based or traditionally based. I see this a lot, where somebody wants to start their young horse with positive reinforcement, and another person at the barn is starting their young horse traditionally or with natural horsemanship. And just for reference, because we've talked a lot about this and I haven't really explained it, traditionally or natural horsemanship fall into like a negative reinforcement. It's more what you would normally see, pressure and release based, pressure and release based training. So I just tend to call it traditional training. So they will see somebody else starting their young horse with pressure and release, traditional training, and they will be there trying to do it with positive reinforcement, or not just trying, they actually are. They're doing it. They're achieving it. They are doing great, fantastic. But the process just looks different. It just looks different. They can start their horse in 30 days, and it may take longer, or it may take less. I've seen sometimes it takes way less time. It really depends on the individual, your experience level, your horse, their past history, all of that. There's so much to take into consideration. Well, this has been a really great conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, for sure.